It's your boy Sly Jordy and welcome back to another episode of F1 23 My Team Career Mode. This time for the Belgian Grand Prix, one I am very excited for. Spa is one of my favourite tracks of all time. I remember going round Spa as a child on Need for Speed Shift. So yeah, Spa's the one track that definitely has a lot of history with me. I've also played it on Forza as well, Gran Turismo. It's just in every racing game. In every racing game you just have to have Spa in it, you know? If you've got a track racer, Spa's not in it, it's not a good track racer likely. But anyway, last episode was the Hungarian Grand Prix, definitely one that was a real curveball. I definitely felt when we did Q1 and Q2 in Hungary, I felt our pace was really good on the softs. Of course, I think we got P1 on Q2. And then I took a risk in Q3, a risk that I thought was going to pay off, where we just didn't use a set of softs at all. I decided to save a fresh pair of softs for the race, and we just used the worn pair for Q3, and we ended up placing P9 in Q3, because I was hoping we'd gain a lot of positions at first through the fresh set of softs, and also going on to the mediums, or starting on the mediums and going on to a fresh pair of softs. But unfortunately, this didn't turn out to be the case, as when we started the race, if you watched it, you will know that it was raining. It was a full wet race, our first ever full wet race. I don't even think our Monaco Grand Prix started off that way. I think we started on inters for Monaco and then went on to dries. And the Hungarian Grand Prix, we went from wets to inters to the softs, and we were just so bad on the wets and the softs that we just couldn't keep all the positions that we did gain at the start, because I think we got up to like P4 from our start, and we just kept losing positions, and we just ended up back where we qualified, back where we started at P9, which seems to be more or less our pace in the P9 area, which is essentially almost best of the rest. I think it is best of the race, best of the rest, other than yeah, if I have a look, Verstappen 1, Leclerc 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then of course you've got Alonso and Norris, who are also faster than us, especially in terms of R&D as well. So yeah, we seem to be the 9th best on the grid in terms of just overall pace. As you can see by the last 4 races, we've placed P9 3 times. And you know, I felt really good about Hungary after Q2, because in Britain, of course, we were 4th, and you know, we could have placed really well in Hungary if it was dry all over, but you know, that's just not realistic apparently. But Belgium's looking good. If it can be dry all weekend, that would be great. And of course, we've just had the ignition system arrive for our powertrain, and of course we got some chassis and durability upgrades arriving soon. We're going to quickly look through just to see if we can purchase anything. I do only have 297 R&D points, so yeah, we are going to be looking through these. I do all my practice sessions. We'll have a look at the chassis one. So I think what we're going to do is go into the aero one, because I remember last episode we saw the beam wing 150 R&D. We're one of the worst in terms of aero on the grid, so any improvement will be great for us right now. And of course, last episode, if you didn't see it, you will know that we got a new teammate as well, Teo Pourchaire. Felipe Drugovich didn't want to stick with the team simply because we were the worst car in the grid in terms of R&D, which I get in terms of a game, but yeah, in terms of actual performance, we were just getting better. And obviously I've made it quite clear that the only reason we're at the bottom is because of how bad our chassis and durability was for the majority of the season. But obviously we got some now, and we have a marketing department event. We got some upgrades coming on in on the 25th, 2 days before the Belgian Grand Prix, so let's hope that, you know, they turn out to be alright. What's going on here? Ooh, a lot of F1 fans have you down as one of the favourites for this year's champions. What? No comment. There's no way we can compete with Sainz and Hamilton. Not consistently, anyway. I think we've definitely competed with Sainz on numerous occasions, but not consistently enough. And Hamilton, no. Okay, so what have we got here? We could up the focus, yeah. Always focus on that. And then we may as well do that one as well, add some acclaim in. So, here we go.
Okay, we've had the new
yes!
fabrication process. We'll have them with
okay,
us for the next Grand Prix.
So we got one of our aero upgrades done and dusted out of the way. It came in clutch. Now let's have a look at the personnel upgrade, the simulator one. Second driver's pace stat will be moderately improved. So let's actually have a look at Théo Pourchaire's, you know. Ooh, 75 rating. That's good. That's really good. If we have a look at the people he's competing with, so it would be, of course, maybe Piastri, but definitely De Vries, Sargent. He's better than those two. Obviously, he was better than Drugovich. He's better on default, so we actually managed to get an upgrade in terms of our actual driver. Not that I wanted to get rid of Drugovich. I made it quite clear I wanted to keep him for the first 2 years, but I guess that is now going to be Théo. But yeah, 75 overall now, better than Sargent, better than De Vries. And then obviously Piastri will be in a much quicker car anyway. Maybe he could fight with Guan Yu Zhou. I don't know. I'm quite excited to see where Pourchaire ends up. I'm actually really excited to see where our second driver ends up in the second. We are bottom right now, but in terms of like over the course of this season and going into next season, like it's going to be a much different car, and hopefully a much better one. Hopefully we deal with a lot of the new regulations better than most. Without further ado, we actually need to get started on the Belgian Grand Prix. I'm not going to do the Pirelli hot lap in the video right now, so yeah.
Think carefully who selects.
Just shut up, dude. He gives me this tutorial every like, can we turn off these bloody tutorials? I don't need them. I know what our rivalry is. But yeah, I'm not going to do Pirelli hot laps in the videos anymore. No need to do that. I'll just do them for the video to get some money. But in terms of our facilities, I don't think we really need to upgrade anything now. I think actually we'll upgrade the fabrication powertrain when we get the chance, and then you know, leave it at that. But without further ado, let's get into the Belgian Grand Prix and hopefully see what the weather is like. Ooh, now this is interesting. I actually completely forgot that Spa was a sprint weekend, so that's definitely thrown a little bit of a spanner in the works. I was hoping for 3 practice sessions, so then you know, I could actually build up as much R&D points as possible, but we'll have to make the most of each practice session that we do have. But there's qualifying in the rain. Now, is that full wet, or is it inters wet? We'll have to find out. That logo does look to be full wet, though, so that will certainly be interesting and definitely might affect our setup, although I'm not going to change too much. The race is what's most important, and even if qualifying doesn't go very well, we have 5 laps where we could improve that. The sprint, like I said in Austria, was essentially a glorified qualifying with other cars around you. So we got the development completed, engine power part, ignition system. Does that improve our place in the progress history? Yes, it does. You can tell right there, and look how close we actually are to AlphaTauri. So I think when the next upgrades come in, providing AlphaTauri don't make any major upgrades, we've got 2 major upgrades coming in. But judging from that, we could actually be up there with Williams as well, maybe even just past Williams, which would be a great start. Obviously, we're going to want to get off of the bottom of the grid in the vehicle performance, because otherwise Pourchaire isn't going to sign a contract extension, which, again, would suck. I don't want to be ping-ponging teammates all the time, and I want to see how far we can bring an F2 guy within 2 seasons. You know, in the 3rd season, I'm going to shake up a lot. We're going to have a new teammate, we'll have a new engine, so I don't know whether I'll go Mercedes or Red Bull. I definitely want to say Ferrari till the end, but for now we're sticking with Renault. I want to see how far we can get within 2 seasons. And honestly, we're doing really good if results or anything to go by, but I also care about what the teammate is doing as well, because, well, the other objective of my team is not only to win the Drivers' Championship, but also to win the Constructors. And even though on my own I've gotten us to like midfield, imagine if someone who was performing like me was, you know, in the team as well, you know, first place, bro, all the time. I'm joking, but like we'd be up there, and I want to get up there in the constructors. But yeah, this has the makings to be a pretty fine weekend. I'm pretty excited for it. Let's get into it at one of my favorite tracks of all time. Alright, so here we are for qualifying. I have done so much practice around Spa, you know, on the lead up to recording this episode, obviously. I really wanted to get, like, the best setup possible, the best preparation possible for going into this, you know, this race, this Grand Prix. So here we are, and obviously, as mentioned earlier, the whole of qualifying will be in the rain, but luckily it's not on full wet. We're on the inters, so yeah, and obviously, luckily, we don't have to do the sprint race or the race in the rain, which is always amazing. Although I would kind of like it for future episodes if like the sprint and the race had different weather conditions. It definitely throws in a bit more variety there. I think we already had that for a previous episode. Was it Austria? I mean, it had to have been Austria, because I remember Baku, and it definitely wasn't the case there. I'd like to forget that episode as much as possible, if we're quite honest, but yeah. As a result of all the practicing I'd pretty much done this week on Belgium, I was feeling really good going into qualifying. Obviously, in terms of the race, and it didn't occur to me until I was doing the race, but obviously the car feels a lot different when the fuel loads are different. But in qualifying, I was definitely really confident, and it did sadden me a bit to, you know, have qualifying in the wet. And honestly, now looking back, I mean, obviously I've had so much work in real life recently that I basically just forgot that qualifying was in the wet. So I did all my practicing around Belgium on the dry, when I really should have been doing it in the rain. So my mistake there. But obviously Q1, we usually get out of Q1 anyway, just on pure setup. Like on pure speed, obviously, like I don't think we're the slowest on the grid in terms of like full power train. I don't think we are at all, actually. I think we've checked, but in terms of like in certain other areas, like mainly durability, maybe aero as well, and chassis, we're definitely not the greatest. And with it all added together, we are still bottom of the R&D chart. But the fact of the matter is, like when it comes to the setup, I can negate a lot of those difficulties, you know. So that's why we never really have any trouble with Q1 anymore, at all. Sometimes, like, I mean, we barely even have trouble with Q2, you know, like the setup is usually really good, and that's just how tightly knit the grid is. But obviously, it's getting a lot more difficult. That first lap was good enough for P10, so that's really good, and we're, almost a second up on our time here. Very, very close to a full second up, and that should easily be enough to get us into Q2. It's actually enough for P3, so that really just does show some really good pace around here. The issue is with the full qualifying in the wet is that like we don't actually have as many intermediate tyres as we would like. I think you only have three or four within the entirety of the 3 sessions. So at some point, not even at some point, 100% in Q3 we are not going to have fresh inters at all. So the chances of us, like, you know, equalizing that P3 in Q1, it's pretty slim. You know, we might get it here in Q2, we might get a really good time here, but in terms of like Q3, I'm not going to be surprised if we do finish bottom of the list or somewhere near there. But the car doesn't feel terrible around here, but again, it's qualifying. We're on lower fuel loads, meaning the car is lighter, so on heavier fuel loads in the races, I don't know how that's going to go. I do know how it went, obviously, since I'm recording this afterwards, but obviously going into it, I didn't know. And that original time in Q2 was not good enough, so was not good enough to get us into Q3, and it clearly wasn't as good as our laps in Q1 neither. I can't really keep up with the track evolution in the wet. You know, I don't know if it's gotten wetter, I don't know if it's gotten drier, who knows. But we come around this final corner, again almost a full second up from our original time. This is the last set of fresh inters that we are using, and it's good enough for P6. So we've gotten into Q3 at the very least, and that leaves us very good for the sprint race, even if we start like right at the bottom as we cross the line here with a time that's only good enough for P8. So yeah. And we're also using a scrub set of tyres, and obviously now we're in P10. So, yeah, we want to get a decent position here, but the only people we're really competing with is Gasly and Norris. Mainly Gasly, we're on the same engine, the Renault engine, but Lando Norris has also been our main rival this season, along with Fernando Alonso. So, we haven't really competed with them too much in terms of the races throughout the entire course of the season, but in the last few races at the very least we've definitely been competing with them, and we're definitely going with a different strategy in this race, in the dries, because mediums to softs not working out for us. Like, we lose position to Alonso and Norris pretty easily towards the end of the race, as we did in Spain, as we did in Hungary. I don't want that to happen again, so a little bit of a spoiler for our strategy, but we're not going to be starting on mediums, at least in the full race anyway. We're going to start on the softs and go on to the mediums, and I don't think we're going to change the strategy of that going forward. I think maybe like when we're like one of the faster cars on the grid, but I think at this point, obviously, since we're slower than McLaren and Aston Martin, we can't really afford to start on the mediums and end it on the softs, because for the most part in most of these races the second stint is the longest stint, and hence why we lose positions to Norris and Alonso very easily in Spain and Hungary, and end up getting a P9. So our highest position that we really should be aiming for is a P7, but obviously I'm an overachiever this season, and we usually get around P4, P5, P6 for the majority of the race. And obviously with our strategy of mediums to softs, we usually bog down towards the end of the race. I don't want that to happen here in Belgium. We feel pretty good round here so far, so I know what my strategy is going to be. And obviously with this scrub set of inters, we can't be a second up from our original time, just like we have in Q1 and Q2, and this time is only good enough for P10. I did warn you, obviously, like, we just don't have enough tyres. I don't know if the other guys have used scrub sets neither. Maybe people like Verstappen were basically using a scrub set of tyres in Q2 just to make sure they have a fresh set ready for Q3. But for us, we wanted to just get into Q3. That's good enough for us. But we're like 2/10ths or whatever behind Lando, Norris and Gasly, which not a good start.
Forget pit stops, forget fuel management. It's pedal to the metal all the way here as we get ready for today's sprint. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting sprint. Max Verstappen put in a fantastic lap yesterday, and he'll start from pole position, with Charles Leclerc alongside. Moving on to the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Bottas, Gasly, Norris, the owner driver, Ocon, Albon, Stroll, Tsunoda, Magnussen, Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, Joe, Sargent, Hulkenberg, Theo Pourchaire, and Nick de Vries. And with preparations almost complete, let's head trackside for today's sprint.
Man, you could really tell that the sprint races were tacked on. You know, like they just changed a few lines of code or whatever, because there's just like no commentary. Like, I would kind of get it for F122 since sprint races just became a thing that year, but, or was it 2021? I don't know, but this game in 23, bro, it's the sequel. Like, surely you would have had enough time. Like, if you had all that time to record voice lines for the F1 World mode, like, where is it for the sprint races, you know? Very odd. So, going into this one, it already said customized, which was quite weird for me. And also, both strategies are the same. So, for some reason, the engineers are really wanting us to start on the mediums, and maybe they know something I don't, or maybe I forgot about something. Maybe it's down to tire degradation, or maybe we're just saving our set of softs for the race. Who knows? But lights out, we're underway in the sprint race. Gasly had a terrible start. We had to get round him, and Norris and Bottas also very slow going into this corner. We're going to dive down just a little bit over into turn 1, over George Russell, and we're now going to slot behind Lewis Hamilton. Obviously, the AI, apparently, it's been patched, like they're a little better at race starts, and we know in the wet they're definitely pretty good, if Hungary was anything to go by, but I don't really sense much of a difference here, as we've jumped from P10 to P6 in the space of a corner, just like usual. But George Russell, clearly faster than us, was about to overtake us, but we're doing really good right now, and obviously it's only 5 laps, so we're going to be able to defend this position quite well, but I don't think we're going to get much further than a P6, to be quite honest. DRS doesn't come in quick enough, and obviously even if it does, that's going to be a DRS train, the 5 guys in front of us. So yeah, P6 is probably the best we can hope for, and emphasis on hope, because George Russell is all over us right now, but people like Lando Norris and Gasly we can definitely compete with. Lando Norris we can compete with when the car's at the best, but our car degrades a lot quicker, so chances are P8 might be our best bet in terms of what position we'll get, because Russell's pretty close to us, Norris is pretty close to us, but Gasly's fallen back a little bit, so that does show that we're able to really compete with Alpine, Haas, etc. But when it comes to McLaren, at least when it comes to Norris anyway, because I don't really see Piastri much often, but when it comes to McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin when they're up there, because obviously they just haven't had a good, they didn't have a good qualifying, did they? Because they're nowhere near the top 10. Well, at least they might be, but just outside it, and nowhere near us especially. But obviously at some point George Russell overtook us, and yeah, we just weren't able to get back. Up until this point, going on to lap 4, we do get DRS. I only have 10% ERS, so that pretty much shows you just how much we're putting in to keeping up with Mercedes here. Simply because, you know, we're just spending so much ERS. Obviously, we've got a new ERS now since Hungary, so this isn't the one we used for Britain or whatever. But we are getting a little bit teeny closer to George Russell as we drive well, and obviously tyre degradation is going to play a factor as well since we're on a harder set of tyres. But now we've got 15% ERS to use. Here we go. Trying to go and get George Russell here, get that position. It's very slow. It does remind me of all the times we did this to Max Verstappen in Britain, in Silverstone. But we are pulling slowly but surely. Could we get a move here? We're going to dive down the inside. We do go a little bit wide, just about able to keep it within track limits. And we actually do manage to keep the position, just about. So now, we just got to defend like a lion, as Fernando Alonso would say, against George Russell right here in the last lap of the sprint race. If we can start in P6 and have a similar start to what we did in this sprint, then like we could be in for maybe a podium position, at least in the first few laps, you know, which would be great. But obviously, as we go through the season, but I mean, not even that, like throughout the entirety of the season, like we've managed to get in front of Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, but they have been all over us, because obviously they're at the top of the R&D charts, whereas we're at the bottom. you know. So even though I do say like the R&D chart doesn't exactly resemble our performance in terms of pure speed, like even if it weren't for that, like we're still like a lot slower than Ferrari, a lot slower than Mercedes, a lot slower than Red Bull, but we do manage to keep ahead of George Russell, just about. There's a lot of side-by-side fighting there with our fellow compatriot, but there you go, a very hard-fought P6, which is going to be very, very important. We do get driver of the day as well, and I think, what is that, 3 points in the sprint? So honestly, that is a phenomenal start for us personally. Obviously, again, we are overachieving, and it does scare me. Like at some point, you know, our skill just isn't going to be enough anymore, you know. And I think that will definitely be towards the end of the season, where for example, when the new regulations come in and we have to focus on protecting some of our parts, obviously we're going to stagnate in terms of the development. Obviously we could also try and get ahead of the R&D chart towards the end of the season, but I think the only thing we should focus on is getting in front of AlphaTauri, for example, because we're going to want to focus on those regulations and be able to get a good car next season and make a big jump.
Welcome then, as we take a step back into the nostalgic golden days of motorsport. Spa is unashamedly a throwback, and all the better for it. Climbs, drops, sharp turns, chicanes, sweeping high-speed corners, all while taking in some of the most beautiful scenery that Europe has to offer. This might sound like a travel brochure, but it's not. It's a race day. Welcome along to Spa-Francorchamps for the Belgian Grand Prix. So here we are once again, ready to go racing through the Ardennes forest. 4.35 miles of long straights, fast corners and massive elevation changes. It makes this not only one of the most exciting circuits on the calendar, but one that makes for some consistently high quality racing as well. Simply put it, there's no place quite like it. Let's run you through the driver grid order for today's exciting race. World champion Max Verstappen starts from pole position, and it's Charles Leclerc in P2. Looking down the rest of the grid, we have Perez, Sainz, Hamilton, the owner driver, Russell, Norris, Gasly, Bottas, Ocon, Magnussen, Albon, Stroll, Tsunoda, Fernando Alonso, Oscar Piastri, Hülkenberg, Joe, De Vries, Sargent and Théo Pourchaire. And with lights out just moments away, it's time to go down to the track. Anthony Davidson, a very warm welcome to you as you join me in the commentary box for today's event. Let's have a chat about Williams. What do you make of their performance so far this season?
Well, the atmosphere within that team seems very positive at the moment. Everyone seems like they're in great spirits and having a lot of fun doing what they do, and that's definitely contributed to the performances we've seen.
Okay, we've got that relief of having points on the board finally, so let's keep that form up and get another top 10 finish today, please.
Man, that must be a glitch. Like, they're only talking about Williams, and they're talking about him positively, and I don't know if you've seen the constructor standings, but they're on 0 points this season, which I think is a bit undeserved, because Albon's performed really well from what we've seen battling with him. But yeah, still, like, that must be a bug. Like, can we talk about MyTeam? Can we talk about Red Bull, Ferrari, like, any team? Please, they're only talking about Williams, and they're the worst team on the grid in our season anyway. Obviously, I support Williams Racing. I love Williams. They're my favourite F1 team, along with Aston Martin, but I do prefer Williams. But yeah, still, you know, undeservedly talked about so much, and that is weird, because I'm pretty sure we just got a green, but our starting position was reset. Not a good start right there, so that is not going to bode well for us at the start of this race. But it's not the worst thing in the world. Worse things can happen as we go up to 5 red lights. And it's lights out and away we go. Carlos Sainz does not get a good start. Lewis Hamilton straight up just cuts us off. And we're going to dive down the inside to get past not only him, but also Checo, also Sergio Perez. And this is going to be a good thing for the first couple of laps at least, because Perez and Sainz, they're on a slower compound. So obviously that makes our life a little easier. I'm not saying that makes us faster or anything, obviously, but definitely makes our life a little easier to defend. But obviously, in Belgium, especially on this straight, it's very easy to overtake, which is a great thing, not gonna lie. But yeah, now we're gonna just want to look to keep up with Leclerc and Verstappen, because I mean, Leclerc's already pulling away from us. There's no way we're going to be able to get a win. There's no reason I was going for a win, but I want to get as high as possible and try and keep those positions as much as possible. And obviously it was around this point. Hell, it was in the sprint race, to be honest. I didn't really mention it. I didn't talk about it, but this is when, like, the sluggishness of the car really caught me off guard. Like, for some reason, I always seem to forget about heavier fuel loads making the car feel a lot different. Because, obviously, like, I was practicing around Belgium on the dries in qualifying conditions, because that's how it is in the time trial. So, yeah, I tried to drive in a similar way, and I can't, obviously. You know, I can't take the risks that I would like to, as Sergio Perez now goes side by side with us. He's going to try and commit to it, as he does briefly gain P3. Can we stay in front of Checo Perez? We do have the inside. We also have the apex. As we push him to the outside a little bit, we really squeezed him out there. And we are able to retain P3, but for how long, you know? It's not exactly our fight. Our fight is in the lower half of the top 10, but the longest we stay in the upper half, the better chance we have in terms of not only getting points, but getting points over our rivals Lando Norris and Fernando Alonso. And I think actually at some point in this race, Lando Norris actually DNF, so that does definitely make our life a lot easier. Yeah, he does DNF, and I have cut it out in the recording here, but at some point he did DNF. I think it was around this point right here, lap 4, might have been lap 5. But essentially we are now going under a lot of pressure from Sergio Perez. We're going to try and make ourselves as wide, almost as wide as possible on this straight, but no point in really fighting Perez here. Like, he's on the fastest car in the grid, obviously, in that Red Bull. So there's no real need to fight him, and we don't really have the facilities to fight him neither, unlike in Britain, where, you know, we were able to fight Verstappen as much as we could over the course of 6 laps. Like, we're not able to do that in Belgium. The straight is just too much. The DRS starts too early for us to really fight it. So, yeah, we really let Perez pass there. But Sainz is someone we definitely have fought a few times this season. And George Russell is someone we've already fought in the sprint race as well. So, we do have a good opportunity there. Lewis Hamilton, I think, is also in P7, so not a good start for him. But the race engineer had a similar idea to me. You know how I love to go for the little undercut strategies, or the overcut, whatever, where we pit a lap earlier than everyone else? Well, before I even fully finalised that decision within my own head, the race engineer did it for me. So this is our pit lap now, as George Russell is really pressuring us here, trying to regain this position. We don't have to worry too much, I suppose, but I still want to have as much time on Russell as possible, as we now go into the pits a lap earlier than everybody else. So this will definitely help us in terms of an undercut strategy. I really hope so anyway, so we'll have to see what happens. But it also comes down to how good the pit crew does here and how good we do on the turn-in, which is optimal. So that's great. And the pit crew, 2.4. Honestly, that is amazing. Obviously, we wish it was 2 seconds, you know, like Red Bull, because, like, obviously those 4 milliseconds really mean a whole lot. if you remember last episode, where Verstappen actually overtook us in the pits. Even though we had a really good pit stop, he overtook us in the pits because he had a solid, like, 2 seconds in the pit stop, whereas we had 2.4. So, yeah, it really does matter. Every millisecond counts in the pits, unfortunately. And we do actually come out of the pits behind our teammate, Théo Pourchaire, who hasn't done well. Lance Stroll actually went into the pits early, and as I said, I was right. Lando Norris did DNF in this race, so at least that's one of our competitors not gaining points. But for some reason, Théo Pourchaire seems to be really fighting us here. Now, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, quite simply because he'll be on really worn softs at this point, so maybe he's understeering, but still, you know? Honestly, like, he's not even fighting anyone at this point. He's almost 2 seconds behind Alfa Romeo, which really does show our overall pace. Obviously, that it's also an F2 driver, but I'm wanting to push him up there, you know, and he should be battling, because Logan Sargent is doing a lot better in the Williams, so I don't know what's going on. I think Sargent is in, like, P17 or something like that. De Vries is in P16. Obviously, Piastri is doing a lot better than our teammate as well, so, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it comes down to focus, because we're still trying to get Pourchaire's focus up, but this is not going to be good for him, as, you know, he's... What is this strategy? We need a career mode update where we get to decide our teammate's strategy, like, seriously. But we finally do manage to get the move done on our teammate here. Honestly, I really want to see how far we can take an F2 driver, so obviously I think when it comes to Season 2, that's going to be something to look out for, because I'm really hoping we have a much better car in Season 2. And now I'm hoping that Pourchaire does fight Hamilton, but I think Hamilton was way too close to Pourchaire for Pourchaire to really put up a fight. So Hamilton does get the overtake done. Pourchaire's really on those worn softs at this point. And speaking of someone who's also on worn softs, that would be Logan Sargent, the American rookie, in the Williams, as we do overtake him quite easily. He did go wide there, and that's what happens on those worn softs. I don't know why some of these lower guys want to stay on the softs a lot longer, because it really does slow them down. But here we are with Guan Yu Zhou, who started on the medium, so he'll likely go onto the softs, or maybe even the hards, who knows. But we make easy work of him. And now, this is where our car's pace really is, in terms of the AlphaTauri, and now I really get to prove that the R&D chart doesn't exactly mean everything in the case of us, as now we do use a little ERS to get up side by side with him, and I did turn it off for this very reason, to sort of test. We do go onto the grass a little bit, but we are quicker than Nick De Vries right there. So I think that does sort of prove that the R&D chart isn't exactly, you know, the most important thing in terms of showing performance, as we now overtake even more people in the pit stops, and we do get a genuine P4. Although I do think Sergio Perez stayed out, and I don't think it matters anyway, because yes, he did. He came back out on the hards, but we do skip ahead to lap 10. A genuine P4 is what we have, as we are now fighting with 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. And obviously, in terms of our setup, in terms of my aggressive defending, we're going to want to keep Lewis Hamilton behind us as long as possible, as we do manage to do it there, but we're going to be in a lot of trouble going on to, I think it's called the Camel Straight, the main straight after Eau Rouge, essentially. That is going to be a bit of trouble for us as we now go onto that straight 2 laps later, as Hamilton was half a second behind us, but he does have DRS as well. He's probably using ERS as well. We're not using that, because I want to save it, and we do let Lewis Hamilton have an easy enough overtake. You know, I think there's no real point in really fighting him. He's clearly a lot quicker than us, so and obviously if we do really keep fighting him, then that's just going to lose us time, and we want to keep a good position, obviously, because I'm not too worried about Carlos Sainz. He doesn't seem to be very good at overtaking us, but George Russell is someone who definitely caused us a bit of trouble in the sprint race. So yeah, and I think even in this race, if I remember rightly, just before the pits. So yeah, we definitely want to keep Russell behind us as long as possible, and Sainz is on the hards, so yeah, that does keep Russell behind, even though he is going to overtake Sainz at some point, or maybe he won't, who knows, because we are now on the 15th lap, the final lap of the Belgian Grand Prix, and we look to have P5 pretty much in the bag at this point, as George Russell finally does get the overtake on Carlos Sainz here. So hard tyres definitely not the greatest decision. They do work, I suppose, but not against the mediums. And I guess that's the thing, like anything under a 50% race doesn't really matter in terms of hard tyres. Because have we ever pitted onto the hards in this season, in this career mode right now? I don't think we have, strangely enough. So I don't know, but we're on 35% race distance, and we've never really had to use hard tyres at all from my memory. So there's that. But yeah, here we are, and into Sector 3, and George Russell is gaining so much time on us without DRS. I don't know if he's using ERS or anything, but I've had to click it on just to make sure we stay in front of George Russell. Like, he really pulled on us there, going into Sector 3. That was insane. He pulled almost half a second within a couple of corners. It was crazy. But we do manage to get across the line for a very, very important P5, and of course with Lando Norris not finishing the race, that definitely helps us in terms of points. And I don't even know where Alonso finished. We didn't see him at all in this race. So yeah, really good race for us.
What a superb victory. Well, Anthony Davidson, a resounding victory today, but what set them apart from the rest?
I feel like consistency was probably the key today. There's being quick, and then there's being quick lap after lap after lap. If you can do that, you can capitalise on other people's errors without making many of your own. And that's an approach that can push you a long way up the field.
For our winners today, after showcasing some incredible driving, there's been a huge push from them lately to stay competitive with the other teams, and they're certainly proving themselves.
Well, surprise, surprise, it is Max Verstappen who takes top step of the podium, and he's likely going to win the championship in our career mode and also in real life. So I'm hoping in Season 2 we're actually going to take the fight to Max Verstappen for real. You know, we've had some fights with Verstappen already this season, but just imagine the type of battles we could have with a car that is around the same performance as his. I don't know. I'm really looking forward to Season 2, if I'm being quite honest. You know, as soon as those new regulations come in, I'm probably going to mainly focus on keeping our upgrades that we need to keep intact, you know. But we do manage to keep P7 in the championship. Fernando Alonso doesn't gain anything over Norris. I don't know where he finished. We'll have to look at the proper leaderboards, but obviously our teammate always dead at the bottom, and there are a few drivers who are still like at the bottom, and we do still have P5 in the championship, and we could also maybe catch McLaren. I don't know. It is highly unlikely. Piastri isn't scoring many points for McLaren, so I guess it could be likely that we overtake McLaren and Aston Martin, because Stroll and Piastri aren't really scoring points, whereas Norris and Alonso are. But we'll have to find out, you know. The higher we can place in the constructors, the more money we're going to get at the end of the season. So, you know, that's going to be amazing, and obviously we're going to want to keep ahead of those guys. But even if we don't, even if we end up in P7 in the constructors, that's still really good by our standards in terms of R&D. So, yeah, really good, and hopefully we can get Pourchaire improved within the next season, going into the second season. But yeah, guys, thank you all so much for watching this episode of F123 My Team Career Mode. If you guys liked it, be sure to hit that like button as hard as you possibly can, comment, share and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Until next time, peace.